What was the last object you threw away? What was it? Who or what made it? When and where did you get it? How did you use it? Why do you no longer need it? Where did you dispose of it? What is its future now that it is no longer with you? The reason I am asking you this is to remind you that we should all be responsible for our waste. Remember, whatever it is that we throw away is no longer meaningful in just a singular moment. Rather, the object's life stretches back to its creation and forward to its reuse, recycling, or point at which it no longer serves any purpose, just like remaining in a landfill. Thinking about the life for our waste make us see ourselves in relation to all that surrounds us, both known and unknown. It places us.
Hello everyone. We are now on chapter 17 where I will be discussing about place-based social studies teacher education, learning to teach for ecological citizenship while investigating local waste issues. In this chapter, there will be two objectives as per the perspective of the author Mark T. Kissling, and the first objective is to argue for an earthen conception of citizenship in social studies education, or as to what the author referred to as ecological citizenship. This ecological citizenship is defined that an ecological citizen recognizes the importance and interconnectivity of all living beings and their communities. Now, it is important that we become aware of this type of citizens as they understand that such beings and communities are often linked in complex ways and acts accordingly, responsibly, and thoughtfully, seeking for a just living conditions for all. Now, as for the second objective, it is to tell a story about a social studies teacher educator, which is Mark T. Kissling himself, and social studies pre-service teachers or his students learning to teach for ecological citizenship through place-based learning. Now, let us begin in the discussion first with rethinking citizenship education in the present time. As we are all aware of, the National Council for Social Studies affirms its decades-long stance that the main purpose of social studies education is creating effective citizens as well as creating an effective civic education where it issues a call for action to prioritize civic learning. As it is obvious from the statement that the message implies for social studies teachers to focus on civic education. However, knowing the social studies literature base, the statement clearly focuses on moral, political, and social, and does not really express regard for the non-human world or any ecological concern. This is particularly concerning, knowing that one of the main issues of citizenship in our time is climate change, and it is a very relevant issue today as it has become more central to the mainstream public and even to the educational discourses. So the point here is that social studies must attend to the reality of climate change as it is a challenge for us of sustaining a livable earth, knowing that some of our practices and consumptions are changing the world. These ecological concern must be emphasized as climate change is a matter that all people are involved. Our daily practices and activities are affecting the way the world is changing, specifically in our climate and environment. And this problem should also be addressed by educating the effective citizens of not just how to live in a just society, but as well as how to care and give equal justice for the non-human world or our environment. Now, let's proceed to the next discussion, which is about place-based social studies teacher education. The basic premise of place-based education is that learning starts with the surrounding context in which a learner resides. That is, no learning occurs in a vacuum, and all learning is placed. which means that learners discovers and construct meaning from information and experience. Now, the growth of the growth of place-based education is in response through creation of high-stakes testing and practices that are coupled with curriculum standardization at non-local levels. As students have mostly experienced being displaced by school through memorization and studying knowledge from distant places, they were metaphorically disconnected from the real places that they inhabit. Now, Greg Smith and David Sobel gave definition to place-based education. Now, Greg Smith and David Sobel gave definition to place-based education, in which place-based education is focused on students' cultivation of roots within their place, communities, and regions, not the cultivation of individual talents and career trajectories. Now, this focus has the power to engage students academically, pairing real-world relevance with intellectual rigor while promoting genuine citizenship. Now, of particular importance of this definition, Smith and Sobel have also coupled place-based education with community-based education. As aligned with place-based education is an ongoing process that does not simply specific to students but rather to all community members that engages in the educational endeavor. This probably means that school is not the only setting that students can engage and learn, but also in a community where not only they can learn about their places, but can also explore their origins as well as solidarity or community engagement. Next in the discussion is the second objective of this chapter, which is all about the waste curriculum in teacher education. This experience that I am about to tell is from the perspective of Mark T. Kissling, who has been teaching waste tour curriculum 5 times in Penn State University. Now, this experience focused primarily on the first time Kissling and his students took the waste tour and connected waste issues to the learning and teaching of social studies. Now, as you can see in this black and white photo, this is a picture taken by Kissling in the entrance of the classroom where he teaches. This picture shows with only 2 places to dispose the waste properly. Next to the classroom door is a recycling container with a narrow rectangular opening at the top, this one. And near the top, near the narrow rectangular opening top is a sign that reads Penn State Recycles. And then the second sticker below it reads Mixed Office Paper. The other waste container is a dark gray barrel with circular opening but is not marked or labeled. The purpose of Kissling taking this picture is to discuss with his students the explicit, implicit, and null messages about waste in social studies, lab, classroom, with these leading questions. But before we proceed in learning how the discussion went, let us first determine explicit, implicit, and null curriculum. Elliot Einstein's work on the 3 types of curriculum that schools teach is helpful in understanding these messages. Now, these 3 types of curriculum are explicit curriculum, implicit curriculum, and null curriculum. Explicit curriculum is the set of intended lessons outlined by authorities such as the teacher or policymakers beyond the classroom, which a student is supposed to learn. Next is the implicit curriculum, is what the students learn in addition to and sometimes instead of the explicit curriculum. It is unintended or at least not expressly stated. Then the last one is the null curriculum. It is what students learn from the absence of certain ideas, objects, events, people, and so forth. Going back to Kisling's photo and questions, let us start with the explicit messages in the classroom about waste from the first question, what do these two receptacles tell you about waste? Now, Kissling mentioned that most of the answers of his students are pretty basic. The large receptacles indicate the most obvious message that waste should be discarded into the receptacles and paper waste should be put in the blue recycling container or the one with the narrow rectangular opening top. And then he also suggested to his students that these are probably the messages that PSU and its custodial staff want them to learn. As we can recall, the explicit curriculum is set of intended lessons which students are supposed to learn. Now moving next to the implicit message of the classroom waste in the pictures that Kissling asked his students to think beyond the explicit curriculum to implicit curriculum. As what was he had expected, responses of his students were slower compared to the first because actually it is the first time that his students encountered the concept or the idea of the ex- implicit message. He then explained that one implicit waste message in the classroom is that there is only one thing worth recycling, which is the mixed office paper. And this message is actually taken based from the labeled container. And then the next implicit message was if there is only one type of item worth recycling, then it stands to reason that all other waste items belong in the unmarked receptacle. Now, the second implicit message is also taught by the relative sizes of the receptacles. Furthermore, it is also basically due to the obvious fact that the only massive container has no label, which will automatically means everything that it is for trash or any kind of waste. Now, moving on to the null curriculum of the null message of the same picture, as what was stated in the definition, null curriculum is what students learn from the absence of certain ideas or objects. Now, just as what Kissling asked, what is not here that perhaps should be? Most of the students' answers includes containers for other forms of recyclable materials, and then the students also list additional items like aluminum cans, glass jars, miscellaneous plastics, and styrofoam. And furthermore, in non-curriculum, almost anything is a possibility, but whatever is considered a possibility needs to be worked through. Like how the students include the possibility of having a container that would collect newspapers as they read local and national newspapers daily. Also, it is noticeable that students never mention the possibility of having a compost receptacle for organic waste materials. And of course, the reason of that is that there is a building policy that prohibits food in the classroom. Maybe having one in the classroom will violate this policy because that will only mean that students are bringing food inside the classroom. Next, Kissling moved his students from beyond the classroom to the hallways, where the students passed by a row of waste receptacles like the one in the picture. Then, he then asked what the explicit, implicit, and null waste curricula here. But as what we can notice, only one was labeled trash, and then the receptacles have almost the same sizes with others, and all containers are labeled. Then Kissling stated that the hallway's implicit curriculum seems more progressive than the classrooms. However, the now curriculum here is the concern about not having a compost container. Why it has become a problem is because unlike in the classroom, food and drinks are allowed in the practical ways. Now, Kissling probed his last questions before ending the quick waste tour with a question that, to what degree is it a problem that there is no place for compost? With this, the students have different responses while returning to the classrooms, and at the same time has able to learn of applying Einer's free curricula as a tool, as a as an analytical tool that they can apply to all matters of social studies, learning, and teaching. And as what Kisling said in relation to this waste discussion, we have a real context to examine the nature of citizenship. Food, which we all consume, and waste, which we all create. We are primed for digging deeper into the places that we inhabit and considering how we can teach mindful of the places that we inhabit. That is how Kisling teach his students about waste curriculum through place-based place, place-based learning. But before I will end this discussion, I would like to give a little background of the PSU Waste Tour, which Miss Endangan will discuss later. Al Matyasovsky supervised the campus waste program that started about 10 years ago. And then during the program, people on campus had a host of questions about proper sorting of waste and the processes after it entered a receptacle. To address these questions, Matyasovsky then began leading a 2-hour field trip around campus that weaved among a number of waste-related facilities. And then in this PSU Waste Tour, anyone could participate from the campus or beyond, and there was no charge since it was viewed foremost as an outreach to the community. And then more importantly, it was also educating the public about waste and the best ways to manage it. And then I guess that is all. Thank you for listening.